Now I want to introduce Mr. Nadim Iskandarani, our next speaker. Nadim has extensive experience in enterprise solution, architecture, technology strategy, and transformation planning. He has over 14 years of technology consulting experience in architecting, designing, and delivering enterprise-grade solutions across the Middle East and the Gulf. In his capacity as Sales Consulting Director at Oracle, Nadim is leading engagements with key accounts in the Gulf by advising and engaging Oracle customers in designing and planning their transformation journeys, leveraging latest modern businesses and emerging technologies. Prior to joining Oracle, Nadim was a senior manager in Accenture Technology consulting practice, where he was leading technology strategy and Oracle engagement across the Middle East. His experience included driving businesses and technology transformation initiative for key private and public sectors in the Gulf region throughout the phase of vision, strategy, planning, and execution. Good morning, Nadim.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back in AUB after some time, giving back to my alma mater and to the country we love so much. Let me just find my presentation and we can get started. There we go. I see the mouses have not changed since I was here, so that's good. You keep some traditions alive. Okay. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to directly jump into the topic of transformation technologies and their impact on businesses, governments, and individuals, right? We believe that this is a topic that cannot be neglected by the entire ecosystem, okay? Transformation technologies are still a tool, okay? They're still a tool which you might select to use or not, but if you select to use them, to exploit their benefit, you have to transform from within. Okay, you have to transform your operating model, your processes, everything you do, right? And if you choose not to exploit them, that's fine. Somebody else will, and will gain a competitive advantage or differentiation in the market and will lead, okay, and take over. So that's the perils, that's the challenges for organizations in this entire region, not specific to Lebanon. It also applies to governments. I personally see governments, public sector and private sector converging, okay? The practices of private sector now are being adopted by public sector across the region. I'll give a very simple example. We used to have in the government, public sector, typically governments run on long-term planning cycles, cash basis for accounting, very slow. Right now, they're all abandoning all of that and going all in, adopting whatever leading practices which have been created, refined, and developed by the private sector. So the boundaries between public sector, private sector converging, I believe there's a lot for the government to learn from the private sector, to adopt it, and to accelerate growth and benefits to their ecosystem. So past technologies are the PC, the internet, the mobiles, all of that we know. So what are the positives from transformation technology? As we said, you can create new products across and services, differentiate yourself, and you can improve. And this applies to all the ecosystem. The challenges, of course, is how do we go about doing that? And the disruption it brings to those companies and to the governments. And realizing the effect of that and the scale of that problem is what companies are trying to grasp right now. And as you see, as we go in this presentation, we have not even scratched the surface of it. Even if you have protected economies with walls across the borders, but now these are all physical walls that do not stand digital walls, okay? There are no digital walls you can put up. You're not gonna firewall yourself inside the country and say, this won't apply to me, it's gonna come, okay? So we're gonna discuss three key transformation technologies. I think AI was very well covered by my colleague a minute ago. Internet of Things is still relevant. It is old as AI, maybe 50 years back. In industries and manufacturing, oil and gas, aviation, they've been using AI to control networks, to control machines, all of that. But now IoT is more about across the cloud, machine-to-machine interaction, the ability to have bidirectional communication and commands between you and those devices and machines at a scale driven by affordability, bandwidth, the advance of telco, and the cloud technologies. Blockchain on the far right is typically associated with Bitcoin. It's not Bitcoin. It's more about the ecosystem, a specific ecosystem, whether it's in the banking, in the supply chain, in the academic, being able to collaborate, share information securely, and to manage all of that. Together, these three bring considerable value and disruption to governments, businesses, and individuals as well, okay? And you will see the biggest impact, I believe, is on individuals, right? Because these technologies have a lot of power. If not regulated, they can be really harmful to individuals. Let's start with IoT. So this is the scale of the IoT right now. It's 50 billion devices by this year, a lot of data, and 3 trillion in expected spend. We all see the value. Businesses realize the value of IoT that it can bring to them. However, hardly anything has been captured from that value or achieved, right? Less than 1% of the data is analyzed. And this is what Ahmad alluded to, that we didn't have the computing power to analyze. We didn't have the storage capacity, okay? And this has all changed as a result of the cloud technologies and the advances as well as on the hardware side. So in terms of cost, it's gone down, it's accessible, and as well as the advances. Going on to IA, I'm not going to talk much about it, but then this is available now and impacting us as consumers, as businesses, and as governments, right? How we interact, how companies interact with consumers, it is there. You know, you see it in e-commerce recommendations, hyper-personalization of all your interactions that the company has or the government has with its citizens, with its consumers, etc. New goods or services, we all probably, most of us have one or more of these or use one of these services or products that have built-in AI. I will personally not buy any electronic device that does not have AI or IoT going forward, personally. I'm using Nest, I'm using the Google Maps, and even another version which is based, again, by Google, which are very advanced. And when you see the benefits of AI in your home, it's really amazing. For the back office operations, yes, that has been the case for the past probably 30 years in the banking industry, in high tech. They've been using, they had affordability to use AI, the early forms of AI, and they had the scale to invest in it, the resources. So they did. We see that in fraud detection, etc. Right now, it's becoming more mainstream, so we see more invasive use cases. Let's say, typically a function reserved to persons, I would say, such as approvals in businesses, is now being done by machines. So actually, the AI agent will actually check the request for approval coming in, match it with the previous history and the behaviors, and make a recommendation whether it should be approved automatically, or raise it as an exception to the attention of the manager. So basically, we've seen approvals go down in certain cases from go down to 98% reduction in the amount of approvals that a specific manager or CEO needs to approve or take action on. This has resulted in better and more informed decision making. So really, we see this everywhere. But there's still challenges, right? The data required to run AI models is still not there. Companies, although they had the data, it passed through their systems, but they never stored it, retained it, or archived it, and that's the biggest challenge and regret that companies have these days, right? It's why didn't we keep that data? Why didn't we save it? Why didn't we leverage it, okay? Of course, from the talent side, for organizations, governments, the skill set required in terms of data sciences and the talent to audit and review this item does not exist. It's very hard, very scarce. I know one customer, it took him more than 12 months in UAE to hire 170 data scientists. But they were committed to this initiative. It took them a long time to hire. These resources are not available, and I think we saw it in Dr. Asman's top predictions for the talent. Data scientist is one of the top. Right? Definitely in terms of technologies, currently the legacy technologies don't all communicate properly amongst each other. They don't integrate properly, and that's a challenge that governments and businesses are facing right now. So what are the 5 considerations for AI? For me, the most important one is the last one, which is the built-in transparency and control, right? Potentially, AI can be abused for really certain use cases that are beyond the control and the regulation of government. Let's say price discrimination, right? The ability for an AI engine to really do hyper-price personalization based on demographic and charge accordingly. You won't have any more price transparency across the same residence in a building or in a street, etc. And if you're in a heavily metropolitan city like Dubai or New York, I would ask you just try Uber over there, switch a couple of blocks from where you ordered the cab, and see the price difference at the same time, okay? Some of us might attribute this to demand or availability of drivers in that area, but it's not. It's also about the ability of those consumers and knowing who the consumer is and his willingness to spend that much money. And this is a concern for governments, right? When you talk about consumer protection, how do we ensure the AI's agents and then the intelligence behind it still supports fair trade and fair play and consumer rights? Definitely, I think this was also mentioned, AI will generate a lot of insight, okay, and give you recommendations, but you also have to have the necessary downstream integrations and ability to consume and monetize on those recommendations, right? Business intelligence was there, and it was more descriptive about what happened in the past. I refer to BI as backward intelligence, AI being a bit more forward, and definitely in terms of scale, what we used to be able to do as human beings is nothing compared to the scale and the amount of data that AI can handle and manage in terms of outcome, and that's the power of AI, okay? Going back to blockchain, this is the one which is most close to my heart, and because this is about collaboration, right? It's about collaboration between a certain ecosystem of partners in a certain value chain, right? It promotes collaboration, and maybe we can link it a bit back to the shared values which Dr. Asman talked about. Blockchain enables partners in an ecosystem to interact with each other securely, privately, based on a shared ledger which is visible by all of them with the right security controls. And yes, it was made famous by Bitcoin, but definitely that was only the start and probably a hype which hurt blockchain more than it benefited it. Right now, it is almost mainstream as a technology, okay? In the UAE, we see it is live in certain property transactions. They plan to take it to vehicle transactions. So any digital record and that needs to be maintained, or digital asset that needs to be maintained across an ecosystem can be updated, managed, recorded securely in this blockchain and shared among those ecosystem partners, right? So government recording is government. This is a great opportunity. If I may say something small for Lebanon, we are jumping from paper, from a paper-based system, totally manual. We have an opportunity to leap to something which is blockchain, right? We should not take the intermediary step of going to the traditional systems, etc. We should leapfrog to blockchain. It is possible. It is the right thing to do. It's the most economically right thing to do in terms of investment as well. It's proven to work and all of that. For supply chain, that's where we see a lot of investments by the consortiums that are there in the supply chain, because the nature of supply chain requires a lot of collaboration and integration between the different partners, right? You have the freighters, the forwarders, the agents, the last mile delivery. All of these need a lot of coordination, especially with the e-commerce these days. They need transparency, visibility on the order status, the packaging, and blockchain can provide all of that at scale. Still, the most important thing is, of course, getting those ecosystem partners to agree on a blockchain collaboration and the contractual framework for that and getting it all started. Definitely, again, once that ecosystem of businesses agree, or government, then we need to sort out the legal framework, right? How do we audit, review accept blockchain records as evidence in courts, in dealings, and all of that. And that's something. Of course, then those partners have to integrate blockchain embedded into their core systems, wherever they are, operational systems or enterprise systems. And of course, currently the ROI is not there, not really visible or tangible for businesses, and that's a challenge we see right now. Okay. So it's not about one technology that you take alone to leverage the power of this transformation. The transformation will come from the mix of these three transformational technologies together. Internet of Things gives you a lot of data, okay? AI will rationalize and give you outcomes and insights from that data, recommendations. Blockchain will, of course, everything is now digital assets, digital contracts, etc. Blockchain will manage all of that among the ecosystem. However, we need to not neglect a couple of things very important. The digital human channels, right? Because IoT is devices, it's about machines, right? And then you have AI, which is the brain somewhere, on a cloud somewhere. And then you have a blockchain, another digital context. But where's the human involved, right? Government is all centered about giving services and managing its citizens, relationship with the citizens. Businesses sell to people or sell to other businesses that sell to people. There needs to be the human involved, right? And that's where the digital human interfaces are playing a critical role in getting the value delivered to the end user and making it feasible, right? So now we have voice assistants, chatbots. These are now mainstream. They're no longer visionary. They're no longer emerging. They're a fact. Most of the time when you pick up the line or call a call center, etc., most probably it's a machine that's answering, a digital voice assistant backed up by AI in the background. Eventually, once the discussion progresses, it gets, triage happens, and it might go to a human assistant, but most probably it might be addressed by a machine. Chatbots, definitely, fully, it's mostly now having automated by AI agents, all of that. Yes. Okay. Just a small example which I like about the combination of these three. Today, we have IoT. It might tell us that we're running short on some sort of supply at home. In the future, it's going to ask us even to go to the next step of ordering it. But guess what? It's not going to only stop there. Eventually, it will tell us, let's order. This is the right time to reorder because there's a special price by this specific brand, which you like. And I believe it makes economic sense to buy now. There's a special offer. So I might not even have run out of beans, okay? But the machine knows my consumption patterns, okay? It will predict when I'm going to run out. It will find the optimal time to buy based on market offers because it's scanning the market. So my data plus the data available outside, sorry for that, and make a recommendation on how to buy. This is the power. For a business, what does that mean? Who's buying? Who do you market to? Okay? Where do you open up shop? Nowhere. There's no more business. Okay? It's machines buying from other machines autonomously. That's a key thing. I think it was in this building almost less than 10 years back. Okay, that one of our professors here in marketing, when I was doing my MBA, told us a challenge facing marketers in Lebanon was that marketers are marketing to the people. They assume that the end consumer is buying. But then they found out, one company found out that it's not actually the people who are consuming who are buying. They actually send their, let's call it a nanny, homekeeper to buy. So you should not really market to the consumer, because he's not making the decision. It's a commodity which that helper goes and buys. So you have to address the helper in terms of perception, right? And this is a challenge that's going to come up here for us. Definitely when we go to healthcare, but this has been already advertised by Apple in their Apple Watch release. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'm sure almost all of us know about it. IoT will sense, will detect, can even call 911 if it senses that you've fallen. All of that is now possible. Take back for me, it's going to change our personal lives first, professional, organization we work, and then the society. So I don't think the government needs to realize that they're not immune to this. Blockchain will not It's not something out there. It's going to impact them because it's going to impact the businesses and the citizens. The governments are managing an ecosystem, right? A platform where businesses and people live, interact, and trade. And so they are stakeholders in that. What has changed? Why do we need to give attention? I'm just going to focus on one thing. It's these technologies are all now have become more of a commodity. They've become accessible to all enterprises. The price entry point has drastically reduced, and this is the game changer, okay? And this is what's forcing companies to really adapt to it. AI was there 30 years back, wasn't really a big concern because few could afford it, okay? But now it is accessible. You can actually go now and try out some AI online on some cloud by subscription, very basic stuff. So definitely all of this is exerting a lot of pressure on organizations, from whether it's coming from sustainability, from regulation, from security, from emerging technologies. Businesses are under a lot of pressure and to change and to adapt and to move forward. But their ability to transform, to adapt to that change is really hindered. And you see them down there. They're not able to react in a timely manner. And that's where the startups come in, right? So startups, they're agile, they're flexible, they don't have any legacy. They go in, cowboys, unicorns, do whatever they want, right? They're not bound by anything, right? So what holds us, sorry, I'm used to walking around, so I don't like to be bound. So the challenge is basically for us, my biggest advice to business is that the mindset is the biggest challenge for you, right? It's your internal policies, your internal bureaucracy, your mentality, your talent, all of that is holding you back from embracing all of this. And we see in a bit how companies are frustrated. Then there's a perception it's too risky, right? Or that, you know what, somebody else should do that. It's not my line of business. It's not mine. It's for the startups. It's for the Americans. It's for the Europeans, whatever. It's not going to impact me, all of that. Or that something is impossible, right? It's interesting when you say someone else should do it. So who should do it? Is it the government? Definitely not, right? Not going to happen for the government to do a lot of innovation. Startups, yes. That's ideally where we look at. But they also have their constraints. We're going to see that. Academia, the universities we are, yes, they are an excellent pool of talent, right? They have the talent. The startups have a mission. It's a small team focused on a specific initiative. Corporates have resources but are too rigid. And this is how I like to stack them up, right? So in terms of innovation and acceptance of risk and willingness to change and not having the mindset challenges, it's the startups, followed by the academia, and then the corporates and the governments. So all of these need to work together. We've covered the challenges for corporates. What problems can we solve, right? It's not only about business, right? So we can solve poverty problems. We've seen excellent applications in agriculture, okay? We've seen where you can use augmented reality, because everybody has a mobile phone. Even the farmers in the farthest point in Africa have mobile phones. So they use the camera on their phone, augmented reality, recognizes the issue or the problem, diagnoses the disease that is impacting the crop, and then advises about the recommendation, all automated. So really advanced cases. The challenge you want to pick, go ahead, pick whatever challenge you want. Most of these are aligned with shared values between government, citizens, and businesses. There is no limit to how much we can optimize. What I typically tell my customers is, challenge the status quo. Look at anything which hasn't changed, okay? Anything which hasn't changed internally for the last 20, 30 years in your industry, in your line of business, in your operating model, is up for disruption. Take your pick, look at it, and you will find better ways of doing it. Doesn't work? That's fine. Fail fast, try, experiment, fail fast. But for businesses, another key advice is do not do it within your organization, okay? Do it external. Take a group of your talent, cross-functional, whatever you want to call them, put them outside. You cannot have innovation and transformation being bound by the regulations and the policies of a highly bureaucratic and operational business, right? They need to think freely, out of bounds, and definitely the biggest challenge of companies is their arrogance, I would say. They don't want to tap into the ecosystem. They want to do things on their own. So typically, you see them working in terms of vertical integration in the value chain, in terms of acquisition or entry. But nowadays, they need to think horizontally across the ecosystem. And that's a change in mindset that happens has to come from the shareholders, I would say. They need to realize that we need to lower our expectations a bit. We need to actually talk to the competition, to the downstream, the upstream ecosystem partners, see how we can bring more value, more differentiation, more efficiency. And that's a key one. Efficiency is key, right? By the way, for me, Uber is about efficiency, first and foremost. It was an efficient model. Unlike the typical taxi models were just roam inefficiently, burning gas, hurting the environment and all of that. And that's how I would wrap up with this. Excuse me for being super fast, but we had the time constraints for that, okay? I'm gonna stick around till almost the afternoon, so feel free to reach out to me for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadim, for your very interesting intervention. You gave us a lot of thinkings and a lot of exercise to study very thoroughly.